President Trump has extended White House invitations to the families of two National Guard members who were shot. 20-year-old Sarah Beckstrom was killed, and 24-year-old Andrew Wolf is still in critical condition after the shooting last Wednesday. An Afghanistan national is facing charges in the shooting. Beckstrom and Wolf were deployed with the West Virginia National Guard to Washington, D.C. as Mr. Trump continues the push to keep the city safe.
I have spoken to both families. Well, I mean, I can give you an update. They're devastated. Does that make sense to you?
Of course.
They're devastated.
Can you give us an update on Angel? How's he staying?
Well, as you know, the one is no longer with us, and Andrew is fighting for his life.
The suspect, 29-year-old Afghan citizen Rahman Ullah Lakanwal, worked with the CIA in Afghanistan and was allowed to enter the U.S. in 2021 through the Operation Allies Welcome program. He was granted asylum earlier this year by the Trump administration, which would have warranted another screening process.
Well, after the attack, President Trump did order widespread reviews of immigration policies. He said he would freeze migration from certain countries to the U.S. Doug Luzader joining us now from Washington with more on this. What does this mean, Doug, for people who are still in waiting?
Well, it's a pause. You know, at one point I think we heard it described as a permanent pause, which seemed like a little bit of a contradiction. We don't know how long this is going to be in place. It only applies to certain countries, and it does raise questions. This whole episode raises questions about how we vet individuals coming into the country. And when you look at like waves of individuals coming in, as we saw after the U.S. pullout with Afghanistan, you know, it's very difficult to, when we talk about vetting people and going through social media and so on, that's a very, very difficult and lengthy process to go through when you have thousands of people coming at the same time. So there's going to be a lot of Monday morning quarterbacking here about how this went forward at that time when so many individuals were arriving in the U.S.
Yeah, he also said that he'd be looking at individuals who have green cards, specifically from 19 different countries.
Yeah, and whether there was, proper vetting for individuals. And, when we look at this incident, this attack that happened here in Washington on those two National Guard members, we don't know if the alleged gunman here was radicalized here, whether he came to this country with ill intentions. I mean, there are still so many unanswered questions about the motive behind this.
I wanted to also ask you about this. So President Trump is now defending Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth over reports that he ordered a second military strike on an alleged Venezuelan drug boat. This is back in September. After the first attack failed to kill everybody on board, some senators are now calling this a possible war crime. Do you have the latest on that?
Yeah, I mean, there are a couple of issues with this. One has to do with the attacks on these boats at all. There have been legal questions about whether the U.S. can engage in these kinds of attacks. But setting that aside, there was a second attack on this boat, apparently, when there were a couple of individuals seen still alive after the first attack. They were obviously not in a position to fight back, the argument goes, and that this would be potentially considered a war crime. You do have a push from some Democrats and some Republicans to look into this, to investigate this. President Trump indicated yesterday that, as far as he knew, that there was no direct order coming from the defense secretary to go after that boat a second time, which doesn't jibe with some of the other reports on this. So there are still a lot of questions here, but there is an appetite in Congress, a bipartisan appetite, to look into this.
And there's still an escalation of the situation there in Venezuela. You've got a U.S. Navy aircraft carrier now there, and they're limiting airspace there is now being monitored as well. So a lot going on there. We'll continue to monitor the situation there. All right, Doug Luzader live for us in Washington. We appreciate it, Doug. Thank you.
Thanks so much.